It's a story as cold and chilling as the snowy ditch that he had been left alone to die in. The murder of 6-day-old Shane Lass was marked solved by local and state law enforcement. But the case turned uncertain, and unsolved perhaps, when their single suspect was set free by a jury of their peers. When Shane Lass was reported missing and found dead, 2 stories and 2 suspects quickly developed. There was Teri Lass's story, and then there was law enforcement's. 2 opposing theories that divided an entire state. Was the Lass family victim to a threatening stalker, one who had tortured the young mother for months, stole their baby, and left behind the cryptic note? Or, as authorities alleged and attempted to prove, did Teri plan the entire event, manufacturing fear and favor from the pieces of her own magazine before killing her innocent child? No matter which way you look at it, there is no justice in this story. Baby Shane Lass, just 6 days old, was mercilessly murdered and left along the side of a cold, rural Iowa road, and to this day, no one has served time for that murder. Who was responsible for Shane's death? Who is the baby killer? Someone should pay for what they did to baby Shane Lass. Less than 1 week after giving birth to her son in February 1992, Teri Lass decided to drive the approximately 7 miles into town to run some errands. She needed stamps from the post office and some personal items from the pharmacy. She decided to bring her newborn baby Shane so that she could show him off to a friend who worked at the pharmacy. At about 11:30 that morning, her husband Mark had gone outside and turned on her car to warm it up. It was cold out, and Mark, who had come home for the birth of their son, was happy to help out his wife in this way. He traveled frequently for his job with the Air National Guard, and Teri was pleased to have her husband back home. It felt safe. In October of 1991, while Mark was away in Japan for work, Teri had been attacked and raped while in their home with their 2-year-old son, Stephen. She had been 5 months pregnant with Shane. The attacker had worn a ski mask, and while she couldn't see his face, he said things that made her believe that he knew who she was. He threatened to hurt her family. He threatened to hurt her son if she went to the police. Terrified, Teri resisted even medical treatment. But when her sisters found her, inconsolable, they took her to a nearby hospital and phoned law enforcement. When no suspects could be identified, Teri and her young son Stephen returned fearfully to their empty rural home. Unnerved, they avoided spending time alone in the house, choosing instead to spend much of their time at Teri's parents' home nearby. 2 weeks later, Teri told family members that she had received a threatening note while she shopped for groceries. The note read, "Rougher next time." Scared that her attacker could return, Teri reported sleeping with a knife. But he had not returned, and life had continued, until this day, 4 months later, February 19th, 1992. This was the Norwalk, Iowa post office in 1992. It's actually a bank now, but Teri told authorities that when she reached this post office at about noon, Shane was asleep. So she left the 6-day-old baby unattended in the front seat of her Chevy Corsica, with the vehicle running. The post office had been closed for lunch, so she purchased stamps from a machine in the lobby. It had only taken a few minutes, but she had left the vehicle unlocked. When she returned to her car, the baby was gone. The baby blankets were gone. In broad daylight and on Main Street, Shane Lass had disappeared from his mother's car. In what she would later describe as a state of shock, Teri walked across the street to 804 Main Street, just an address at the time rather than a name. Teri walked here and into what was then called John's bar and used their phone to call her husband and tell him of their missing son. Mark called 911.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, this is Mark Lass. My wife was just in at the Norwalk post office, walked inside. Our week-old boy was just taken out of the car.
At the Norwalk post office?
Norwalk post office.
Can you give me a vehicle description? What direction of travel did it go?
No, the car's still there. They just took the boy.
While Teri was being interviewed, police found the note left behind in her vehicle. Constructed from the letters of a magazine, it read, "I told you. One down, one to go." What did this terrible, ominous message mean? Where was the missing baby? Was the Lass's other young child at risk? The first priority was to find Shane, and an immediate search for the infant ensued. Multiple agencies were called in to search, and helicopters took to the skies. As the news of the missing baby spread around the small town, the people of Norwalk banded together. Many volunteered or donated food for searchers. A local flower shop donated hundreds of blue ribbons. There were large ones for town street signs and mailboxes, and small ones worn by those volunteers who were searching. The Lass family reverend conducted hourly prayer vigils at the local Methodist church. Temperatures hovered around freezing Wednesday night. In order to get an early start, volunteers met while it was still dark the next morning. 60 Air National Guard joined friends and family members to look for Shane. Teri had grown up in Norwalk and had been an avid horseback rider. Fellow riders were out in the cold in full force, searching garbage bins, ditches, and fields. They covered more than 120 square miles. Searchers set out determined, cold, and pessimistic. Warren County Deputy Bob Gebhardt said, "We really don't want to find anything." But sadly, they did. At 3:30 p.m. Thursday afternoon, 4 searchers on horseback located Shane's little body in a farm ditch south of town near Prohl. He had been found in a small box wrapped in baby blankets and garbage bags. He was still wearing the pink and blue terry cloth pajamas with little footballs on them. Shane's body was taken to the Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory in Des Moines for an autopsy. Norwalk Police Chief Mike Richardson called on the public for tips. "We are considering it an abduction and homicide," he said Thursday night after the little boy had been found. "We are in dire need of more information. Anything they may have seen, they may have heard, anything at all." Area businesses quickly offered various rewards for information totaling $20,000. "Somebody knows something," Chief Richardson said, "and I hope like hell they have a conscience." Norwalk is a small town, 10 miles south of the state capital of Des Moines. It had a population of about 6,000 in the early 90s, and the Norwalk Police Headquarters was a single-story, white-frame home that had been converted into a police station. In such a small town, many in the police force knew the Lass family. Therefore, they willingly made room for outside agencies to assist in the investigation. In total, 60 law enforcement officers crowded inside the tiny police station to work together on the case. There were investigators from the Norwalk Police Department, members of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, and the FBI working together. They quickly began conducting interviews, and by Friday believed that they had already spoken with anyone who was in the downtown area during the time of Shane's disappearance. No one had reported seeing any unidentified vehicles either parked or fleeing the area. At a Friday evening press conference, the Norwalk police chief spoke with the media. There is no particular suspect. We are still going in a broad, general direction. Kevin Parker, Warren County attorney, said, "At this point in time, it appears the child was taken from the post office." However, he also said, more facts will come out as the investigation continues, and he would not confirm or deny the existence of the note found in the car. The attorney also addressed a question as to why the couple had not made a public plea for the child's safe return. He said that Teri and Mark felt they were unable to compose themselves for such a request, calling the couple very distraught and upset. The Lass family did release a statement that Friday following the location of Shane's body. They thanked law enforcement and local residents for their assistance and support, and they also requested privacy to grieve. Authorities admitted right away that the investigation was off to a slow start, calling it difficult. We had no description and no information from the onset of this incident. Obviously, it's frustrating. Still, they appealed to the public for anyone with any information that might be helpful to come forward. Chief Richardson said, "We are getting bits and pieces of information, but we need more." Over the weekend, investigators worked to examine the physical evidence found with baby Shane. They traveled to a nearby Earl May to identify the origin of the box Shane had been found in. The manager reviewed photographs of price stickers and store tags for large cartons that contained bags of birdseed. Monday, February 24th, the family held a funeral and burial for Shane. Teri sobbed loudly. Chief Richardson attended the ceremony and remained tight-lipped, revealing very little in the way of new information regarding the investigation. Light snow fell, and the crowd solemnly recited the Lord's Prayer as the tiny casket was buried at the Norwalk cemetery. Shane's family was no stranger to sadness and to tragedy. The little infant boy was buried next to his sister, Tamara. 10-day-old Tamara Lynn Lass had passed away nearly 4 years earlier, on March 1st, 1988. Interestingly, Tamara's date of birth had been February 20th, the day baby Shane's body had been found. The state medical examiner, Dr. Thomas Bennett, announced that he would be conducting a routine review of 10-day-old Tamara Lass's death. Dr. Bennett called the review normal procedure and told the media that an autopsy had previously taken place and that no injuries of consequence could be found on the little girl. At the time, her death had been ruled as SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. However, Dr. Bennett also said that a 10-day-old infant is rather young for SIDS. And in any of these cases of a sudden death for a very small child, anyone less than 3 weeks of age, you have to be very suspicious. Because usually SIDS doesn't occur in that first 2 or 3 week period of life. It can, but it's very rare. Not only had they lost 2 children now, but in their 8 years of marriage, Mark and Teri Lass had experienced what seemed to be an exorbitant amount of disaster. First, in the mid-1980s, their rural Spring Hill home had been damaged by a tornado, followed by Tamara's passing in 1988. In October of 1990, they experienced 2 household fires 4 days apart. The first fire heavily damaged their upstairs, but the second fire completely destroyed the house. Both incidents had been considered suspicious. Then, 1 year later, in October of 1991, there had been the break-in and attack. Teri and her family felt that the fires and the rapist were the work of a single offender, someone who wanted to hurt Teri and her family. However, local investigators had privately begun to question the existence of a stalker. The Warren County Sheriff's Office had sent a lab crew to the Lass family home after the October attack. The Des Moines Register reported that they hadn't found physical evidence of a break-in and were unable to identify any suspects. When asked, Chief Richardson said that there was no firm evidence of a stalker, though he called the investigation still open and would not answer any questions regarding either of the notes. These revelations, the inquest into Tamara's death, the repeated misfortune and tragedy, marked the start of some skepticism from the media and amongst the public. Why? If Teri had been truly concerned about a violent stalker, would she leave her helpless, newborn baby in an unlocked vehicle. The day following Shane's funeral, law enforcement brought Teri into the Iowa DCI office and, after several hours of questioning, arrested her. They charged her with murder in the first degree for the death of her son. Authorities had found contradictions in Teri's story, and a probable cause statement alleged that she had faked Shane's kidnapping. They disclosed that evidence found near Shane's body indicated that the note located in Teri's car had been made in the Lass home from a true story magazine addressed to Teri, and with tape found at the house during a consent search. Many people in the small town were shocked. Teri had grown up in Norwalk and had been born to the Essex family, which was large and well known in the area. Their friends and acquaintances described the couple as friendly and reserved. Teri had worked at various small businesses around town as a bookkeeper, a trustworthy and honest position. Their neighbor spoke with reporters and said, "They're just good people who are family-oriented. They've always treated their son so well," speaking about 2.5-year-old Stephen. "That's not what I would consider the profile of someone who would kill a baby, especially their own." Town residents began to take sides. Some rallied behind the young mother. Others stopped speaking with her. Several people reported that Teri was prone to overstatement, occasionally telling stories that seemed exaggerated. However, no one interviewed actually believed that she was capable of murder. A coworker said she might have said that she had been somewhere when she hadn't been, but people at the bank liked her. I was glad to work with her. Clark Meyer, the bartender at John's, told a reporter that he did not recall that Teri seemed particularly upset when she entered the bar that day to use the phone. She hadn't been yelling or crying. "I would have noticed that," he said. Many people were left wondering, had Teri done what she had been accused of? After several days, Teri posted bond and was released from jail. She went home to just her husband, as Mark and Teri's toddler son Stephen had been taken into protective custody the afternoon she had been arrested. Dr. Bennett, the state medical examiner, declined to exhume little Tamara's body for examination and instead completed a review of the existing files on her death. Despite being well below the typical age for SIDS, Dr. Bennett reaffirmed the cause of her death as sudden infant death syndrome. When it came to baby Shane, however, the evidence against Teri mounted. The Warren County Sheriff's Department filed a search warrant stating that fibers from Teri's coat and gloves matched ones found on the plastic bag that baby Shane had been found dead in. Could the young mother really be responsible for the little boy's death? Could she perhaps be responsible even unknowingly? A decade earlier, in 1981, Ruth Findley had been revealed as the poet, a cryptic messenger that had stalked herself and terrorized the citizens of Wichita, Kansas for years. Traumatized as a young child and set off by a series of stressful life events as an adult, Ruth had developed an alternate consciousness, one that she had no memory or awareness of when in her regular conscious mind. Psychologists believed that it was within this alternate consciousness that the poet festered and grew, spitefully spitting out messages of hate. It took Ruth years of intensive therapy to come to terms with her repressed childhood trauma and abuse. But with this work and the assistance of many, the problem of the poet had been addressed, and he had been banished. Approximately 2 weeks following her arrest, Teri Lass enters a plea of not guilty at a preliminary hearing. An initial trial date of May 27th was set, but due to an excessive amount of media buzz and pre-trial publicity, this date is scrapped and the trial quickly moved to Jasper County. A new date in December was selected, and as that date approaches, 12 jurors and 4 alternates are chosen. But just 2 hours before opening arguments, the court declares a mistrial. After learning that all 16 people had previous knowledge of the case, Judge Darrell Goodhue believed that this jury may have also been influenced by publicity and thought that several jurors may have already made up their minds that Teri was guilty. 4 months later, in March of 1993, it was finally time for the trial. More than a year of preparation, false starts, and location changes had led to this. The trial started on March 9th, this time in Lee County. Jurors were repeatedly asked not to watch or read the news. Many witnesses were called for both sides, and for 6 days the state called witnesses in to discuss the details of that day and the case against Teri. At the Lass home that morning, Mark and Mark's mother had last seen Shane alive between 11:30 and 11:45 a.m. Shane had left with his mother for a spontaneous trip to Norwalk for stamps and gauze from the pharmacy. Teri had told law enforcement that Shane was with her at the post office at noon, but results of the autopsy had determined that baby Shane was likely already dead or dying by 11:50 a.m., February 19th, before his mother arrived in Norwalk. Several people testified to seeing Teri that morning, either at the post office or immediately after. None of them reported seeing her baby, nor did they see anyone else approach her car. Area contractor Tim Hildreth testified that Teri already appeared distressed before learning of her son's disappearance. He had met her at the door of the post office, leaving as she entered. Norwalk patrolman Doug Metzger was first to arrive that morning after the 911 call was made. He testified that when he spoke with her that day, Teri spoke quietly and exuded no sense of grief or even panic when she told him that someone had stolen her infant. He said that she appeared calm, looked straight ahead or down, and never made eye contact. DCI criminalist Jerry Brown testified that the tape found at the Lass home positively fracture matched the tape used to create the note found in the car during the kidnapping. The magazine that had been used to cut out the letters for the message had been found in a ditch near to the boy's body, and the subscription label on the magazine showed that it had belonged to Teri Lass. No fingerprints had been found on the note. For some reason, however, neither the tape dispenser or the magazine had been checked for fingerprints, something that Teri's defense attorney Alfredo Parrish criticized at length. The magazine would have been a likely place to find incriminating fingerprints, he pointed out. Why had this part of the investigation been overlooked? In fact, state's witness John Kilgore told the jury that it wasn't until just the previous week had he even been asked to check the fingerprints found under the padding of Shane's car seat. Those prints could not be identified, and they did not match the known fingerprints of Teri Lass. For the defense, Teri's attorney Alfredo Parrish called numerous witnesses as well, including 2 people, Everett and Donnie Canoyer. They described seeing a man wearing glasses standing next to a pickup truck on Wednesday, February 19th, the day Shane died. The couple said that the man had been carrying something underneath his right arm. Everett believed it may have been baby blankets. Who was this unidentified man? Why had his appearance never been reported in the media? The defense also called a private investigator that testified that he had discovered a 12-inch cut in a screen at the Lass house. Was this evidence of a stalker? Proof of the break-in that law enforcement did not uncover? What about the True Story magazine? The edition that the letters had been cut from had been October of 1991, the same month as the alleged break-in and rape. Teri's lawyer argued that a stalker who could have snatched Shane from his mother's car could also have taken physical evidence from the Lass home in a scheme to make it appear that Teri had killed Shane. However, he has no explanation for the return of the roll of tape that had been used to create the note. When Teri's older sister, Diana Speaker, takes the stand, she tells the jury about her sister's rape in the fall of 1991, and that the attacker threatened to hurt Teri's son if she told police. This testimony draws an objection from state's prosecutor John Criswell, who argues that there was no legal foundation for this rape testimony. In fact, he said, the hospital records from Lass's examination on the day of the attack did not support her rape claim. Diana was not considered a reliable source for the statement, and therefore Judge Darrell Goodhue told the jury to ignore Diana's comments. Finally, Teri took the stand in her own defense and told the jury that she believed that Shane had been killed by a man who had raped her the previous fall. She told jurors that she was in shock when she discovered the baby missing from her car in the minutes after she had left him to buy stamps. She said, "I just remember looking over at the car seat. There were no blankets there. Shane wasn't there." "What did you feel?" her attorney asked her. "Shock," she replied. "I couldn't believe it." Was Teri Lass victim of a crazed kidnapper, or the orchestrator of a horrific murder and self-pity? Could she suffer from some form of factitious disorder, like Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen's by proxy? Was the stalker real? What of the emotion and the tears shed on the stand? "I just couldn't get over the tremendous guilt from leaving Shane in the car," she said through sobs. "I don't know why I did it, and I can't take it back. I just can't take it back." Two sides and two stories. Who would the jury believe? After just 5.5 hours of deliberation, they had a verdict. The jury declared Teri Lass not guilty. Members of the Lass family hugged and cried tears of joy. Many Iowans were stunned. After more than a year of media coverage, they felt that Teri was so obviously guilty. How could this happen? Dennis Hoffman, associate professor of criminal justice at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, wrote, "The answer is good lawyering." In an article titled "Second-Guessing the Jury Members in the Teri Lass Verdict," the Des Moines Register presented a poll that found only 32% of respondents agreed with the jury's not guilty verdict. Writer Mark Hansen went on to state that the jury never really proclaimed Lass's innocence, only that the state had failed to prove Teri's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. "We're just glad it's over," Mark said to reporters. Teri's sister Diana spoke after the verdict, saying, "We feel Teri was not only victimized by the state, she was victimized by the media at the time and by the police." Diana expressed additional concern for Teri, as no one had identified the stalker. She told reporters that the Lasses had installed a security fence and an alarm system as a precaution. When asked about Teri's not guilty verdict, Warren County Attorney Kevin Parker lamented, "It was a difficult case all around. I think the evidence was there." Even if it had been, the state had failed to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt, and Teri was free. No one was serving any time for Shane's death. She returned to Norwalk, and soon their oldest son was re-released to her care. By then, Stephen was 3.5. Just 2 weeks later, a crew from tabloid TV show A Current Affair arrived to tape an interview with the family. Rumors of a book deal swirled. Then that June, the couple appeared on Oprah. Teri and Mark recounted the horror of losing baby Shane and through tears, Teri shared her theory on the kidnapper.
I was assaulted in October. And,
By a stranger?
yes. And, he had told me that if, I went to the police, he would come back and hurt one of my children.
So you thought it was the person who had assaulted you?
Right?
Yes. Have they found the person who murdered your baby?
No.
No.
If they were pursuing the theory that a stalker had killed Shane Lass, police were keeping mum about the investigation. Alfredo Parrish, Teri's attorney, said that she had done a good job getting out the message through her appearance on Oprah, the nation's #1 talk show. And that message was that law enforcement officials do make mistakes. Without a doubt, that was true. The couple shared that despite the difficulty of losing a child, their relationship was still strong. Mark said that he had doubted Teri briefly while they had been separated that day of her arrest at the DCI office. But once he saw her, he said he asked if she did it, and she said no. He believed her. The couple learned that they were expecting twins later that year, in December of 1993. Teri told the media, "We've wanted a bigger family, and this is our way of trying to get back to normal." Though she also said, "I don't think our lives will ever be normal." That always had been, and it seems would continue to be the case. The Lass family filed for bankruptcy in 1995. In 1997, they experienced a third fire, this one causing extensive damage to the home. But no one had been hurt. Once plagued by sadness and tragedy, slowly the lives of the Lasses faded back into obscurity. There were no more front-page appearances, no more drama, at least no more death. The truth of what really happened that cold February day, even now 30 years later, especially now 30 years later, it's fuzzy, uncertain, and it feels just out of reach. Two terrible truths, two separate stories. Who do you believe? The conclusion of either story is a discouraging and uncomfortable one. If you believe Teri is innocent, then for the 30 years since this event, the Lasses have lived with the real fear of a yet uncaptured stalker and baby murderer. If you believe what law enforcement presented, Teri has spent the last 30 years free of consequence for the death of baby Shane. In the end, and at the heart of this journey, whoever it is, a baby killer has gone free. In those 30 long years, no one has paid for the innocent, stolen life of Shane Lass.